I think probably the least important part of my background is having a master's degree in community and regional development. What's more pertinent is that I've got about 15 years of working in sustainable agriculture, beginning with interning and apprenticing on organic and biodynamic farms in Northern California. And from there, I learned that to be a successful farmer, you have to first be a good carpenter, welder, and mechanic. And I am none of those things. So I switched to marketing, and since then, I have worked on managing CSA farms, starting a CSA, founding and managing a farmers market, being a sales manager for a wholesale fruit and veg marketing cooperative, and being a grower chef liaison for another small-scale distributor in the Monterey Bay, and that's a glorified term for driving a reefer truck from farms to restaurants. And so my experience is more firmly rooted in schlepping fruits and vegetables, and in starting organizations and businesses. And so that's really how I got to be a food and ag co-op development specialist at the California Center for Cooperative Development. And so I specialize in helping people start organizations. And that is what the center does. We mostly work with groups that are not yet cooperatives, that need to go through a planning phase. So we help them conduct feasibility studies and business plans. And for those of you that went to the finance workshop breakouts this morning, talked a lot about USDA resources, and we are pretty good at getting the Rural Business Enterprise grants that have a track for business planning, feasibility studies, and that is usually the way that a group goes from just being around the table to really getting a plan done and thinking about the operations. Then we help groups actually become incorporated, start doing business as a cooperative, and we bring as many resources to the table for their financing. So learning how to present it to a lender, knowing what kind of lenders are willing to lend for the kind of things that you actually need the money for. Those are the kind of things that we do. What I'm here today to do is explain, bring to you illustrations of cooperative developments using 2 case studies. And I'm going to use the Central Coast Ag Cooperative, also known as Coast Grown, and Capay Valley Growers. And both of these have, I think, connections to what's happening in this room. I saw upstairs that somebody wrote down on their wish list a mobile slaughter unit. So I at least have an audience of 1 person for one of these case studies. And that's the Coast Grown case study. Capay Valley Growers is very near Davis, where I work. And actually one of the farms that's involved in that is where I had my first internship experience. And it also has a slow money connection. So I'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through the case studies. But first, I just want to give you, and this is as lecture-y as I'm going to be, is this one slide here, this is all that a cooperative is. It is a voluntary association of people united to reach shared economic, social, and cultural objectives for its members through a shared business, and I probably should have underlined business, managed democratically. And from there on, there's probably 50 different flavors of cooperatives. The way that you structure them, the way that you finance them, the way that they operate. There are many different ways. And I'm also going to give a disclaimer in that one of my case studies is not an actual incorporated cooperative, but they are a grower-owned business, which is why I subtitled my presentation, Cooperatives Grower-Owned Businesses. And so they keep in line with just about every tenet of cooperative business, but they just chose to incorporate under different statutes. So here are 2 case studies, Coast Grown and Capay Valley Farmshop. 2 other similarities and that also relate to things that you've heard about today. For my work, I don't work with groups that are organizing cooperatives to represent a commodity. You know, California especially has a history that goes back 100 years of cooperatives that do a very good job of representing an entire crop: almonds, walnuts, plums, it's brands like Sunmade, Sunsweet, Blue Diamond, Sunkissed. Those are all cooperatives. They're all really darn big, and they've been around for close to 100 years. The kind of cooperatives that I work on these days are based on regionality, local with a capital L. They are about food systems, and they are growers that probably don't grow the same things, but they're very concerned about their region, their rootedness in their community. They want to be the authentic choice for local foods, for their buyers. And this happens a lot in California. You'll find a lot of local products represented that will come from largely the Central Valley. And Coast Grown is in the Central Coast, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara counties. And they found that that certain companies were representing products as being Central Coast grown that were really coming from San Diego and Central Valley. So they wanted to be the authentic choice for local foods. The origins of Coast Grown come from two organizations, Central Coast Homegrown Meat Association and the Central Coast Ag Network. And the Homegrown Meat Association formed because there was a very astute rancher who was involved in different organizations and found out that a rural fire district couldn't find a way to spend some economic development agency funds. So there was $100,000 on the table that was about to be sent back to the government, and congressmen managed to redirect that so that they could design the plans and actually have built a mobile slaughter unit. So essentially, they got a mobile slaughter unit for free. And this is in about 2002. So this is one of the first mobile slaughter units that was made that is still around. And they banged their heads a long time trying to get this thing USDA certified, and they eventually parked it after about 2 years of banging their heads against the wall. Central Coast Ag Network is a nonprofit that is about education to the public about the local food system. And there's a lot of farmers on that board. They do a lot of farm-to-chef events, farm-to-school benefit dinners, that kind of public education. There's probably organizations in Tucson that are dedicated to those kind of things. The director of the Homegrown Meat Association saw a certain spark in the director of CCAN and asked her to try to get this mobile slaughter unit up and running, get over that certification barrier. And she said, I have a better idea. Let's create a business that's about our local foods, so fruit, vegetable, and meats. And at the heart of this will be the mobile slaughter unit. So it's going to tie together all these different pieces and essentially turn it into a business. And so that's how Coast Grown was born. This is what they did in the beginning stages. They had their mobile slaughter units, so they managed to get it running. They operated a website for marketing and sales, and then they also had a reefer truck to do fresh fruit and veg distribution. So, okay, accomplishments. Yes, they got their business plan done with the help of the Rural Business Enterprise Grant. They developed HACCP plans from scratch. USDA, the folks that they were talking to had never seen a mobile slaughter unit. And so that's the beginning of a long process of mutual education. Recruited members, 17 members and owners of the co-op. They raised member equity. They put in each $1,000. They got a loan from a local bank that also had ranchers on that board of directors of that bank. That helped a lot. And they got the mobile harvest unit running. They set up the website and online ordering capacity, with an online ordering capacity. So hold on, okay, let's know that there's a happy ending to this story for the next slide. So 1 year later, this is where they are. No sales via internet. The MHU is parked again, and the two employees that they had, including the general manager and founder, were terminated simply because there was no more cash. So what we have to learn here, and this is the important part, I'm here to help you think about cooperatives and what it takes to get them started. We want to look at some of these the big hurdles that these folks faced and how they dealt with them. So the important lessons in this case study for me are that in the business plan area, a lot of key assumptions that they made did not hold, and that had serious economic repercussions. So you had the number of animals per day that they expected to be able to put through the unit was 5 instead of 8, so that's like, what, a 40% reduction in revenue. The number of days of week that they could get a USDA inspector out there was 1 day instead of 4 days, so how much more does that reduce your revenues? The cost of moving the MHU around was a lot more than they had originally expected. The cost of developing the HACCP plans, that took 4 times as long. Like I told you, both the cooperative and the USDA officials were essentially learning at the same time, and it took a long time. And purchases via website. They made a lot of great connections in the planning through the RBEG, grocery stores, independent chains, restaurants. That was the main target market that they were looking for. And everybody said, we're going to be really psyched to use your website. That means I can order when you're not around, in the middle of the night, whenever. And that was kind of people's higher self talking. And the way that food usually moves around is by fax, email, and telephone. They got essentially 0 sales. They got about $100 worth of sales from their website. And because they were depending on this so much, they didn't have a sales person on the phone making the phone calls. So they had essentially no actual marketing sales. $1,000, they kind of came up out of what they felt was they could live with. And considering the business plan and all the rosy projections, they didn't need, $1,000 might have been okay. And especially helped that the mobile slaughter unit was built for them. They didn't put any money into that. Financing, the loan was for infrastructure. And I think you heard in a previous workshop that it's, that banks, well, it was Woody, that most lenders will usually want some collateral. And so the loan was for only to buy infrastructure, so that's freezers, a walk-in, a truck. What they needed was working capital. They needed working capital to get through that HACCP planning, to do the actual people work. So no salesperson equals no sales. Okay. There were other things that also they had no control over, and that's that there was the MHU delays, the HACCP plans. Does everybody understand HACCP plans? I've said that word so many times that I feel that everybody should know that. That's hazardous and something critical point. So it's essentially food safety. It's about meat and food safety. You have to come up with for every animal and for every kind of product that you come out of a slaughter facility. So you have to show that you're controlling temperature, and it's just all about food safety. It's a food safety plan. That's federal, right? Yeah. So something else that was out of their control, when they actually went through all this and they were ready to sell, the cut and wrap facility went out of business. That's not their business. That's another person's business. And what good is a slaughter unit? What good is slaughtering an animal if you can't cut and wrap, especially for your retail? Yeah? Long-term drought pushed ranches to liquidate herds. So they were just working with much fewer animals to begin with. And that delay, yeah, the important of August is, at least for that area, most ranchers are done slaughtering around August. So there was also not much to put through those, to put through that unit. But remember, I promised you a happy ending. So Coast Grown today, okay, that's been 2 years since they essentially stalled. This is a picture from September. They got it going again. They retained the MHU. The cut and wrap facility was purchased by somebody with a lot of money, and then they leased it to 3 butchers, and so it's up and running again. And it's actually providing them services now. So their beginning goal of having this mobile slaughter unit serve their community is now finally coming to fruition. And now, I just talked to one of the founding directors about, what their situation is. And she said, we finally got it going. We don't have to do those HACCP plans ever again. So that's all sunk costs, and won't have to ever go through that again. And now we just have to get our second wind and regroup to do a better job on marketing. So that's their next stage. So these folks, I'm happy to say, they're still up and cooking. They're a little bruised, but they got it going. So I'm proud of them. And And so I'll stop right there. I have a second case study, and I need to do a little time check.
I think you're okay.
Cool, about halfway through?
Yeah.
Super. So I'm going to go through my second case study, different region. Also involves fresh fruit and veg and ranchers as well as wine, as well as olive oil and lots of other products that are grown really well in this part of California. This is the Capay Valley. And this also has origins with a nonprofit organization called Capay Valley Vision that actually came up with this label so that farmers in that valley can use this label in a few box templates to pack their boxes in. So it's not a marketing organization, but it's providing some marketing tools for the farmers of that region. So that's the first step. And the director of that organization was a guy named Thomas Nelson, who is married to one of the partners of Full Belly Farm. These are all members of Capay Valley growers. And this is just a representation of information that they have on their website. So this is a co-op that keeps the identity of each of the producers all the way through to the end consumer. What they started out, here's another good story. These are people that don't stay down when they've fallen down. So they originally started here as Capay Valley Farmshop. They actually had a retail store that was located in a town called Vacaville, exactly halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento, really. And they were going to set up kind of like a mini Ferry Plaza Farmers Market, the famous San Francisco farmers market on the Bay. And it was even going to be curated by the same person who organizes the San Francisco Ferry Plaza Market. And they managed to get it open, but let's see here. They accomplished these things. They got their business plan, they got their financing, they managed to raise $300,000 between farmers, ranchers, and their family and friends, really. So 2/3 of the shareholders are farmers, the other third are friends and family that are not agricultural producers. They got the store built, but what happened here was that they also had to close within a year because they did everything right on their end they could possibly do on the business planning side, but the external factors are that the location, the developer, this is a new place, the developer did not put in all the other businesses that he promised he would. So it was essentially it was a ghost town. It was that store, another restaurant, and about 12 different empty storefronts. And so they very intelligently wrote into their clause that if we don't have neighbors, you're going to give us a bunch of our money back. And they got that. They preserved their investment. They got a fair amount of their money back. And instead of just giving everybody monies back and go home, they regrouped at their annual meeting and came up with a new plan. So what Capay Valley Farm Shop, they still use the name Farm Shop as a brand, is that they have a bundled CSA that goes to the employees and customers of organizations like these. So we have Adobe employees, Chevron employees, 2 hospitals at San Francisco General Hospital on the bottom. IDEO is an internet company, and it's a bundled CSA, and I think that most people in the room have an understanding. It's a multi-farm CSA, and on top of the multi-farm CSA, this is an example of a springtime basket. They offer an online pantry because they don't put in olive oil and wine in their baskets. And when people order their boxes, it has to be done via website. So don't give up on website sales. For consumers, it works out actually really quite well. But they offer olive oil, nuts, all sorts of other products as add-ons to the regular CSA box. While they're there, each of those companies usually has a decent cafeteria, and they have health and wellness programs. So they do wholesale orders with those same companies. And the way it works out is about 80% CSA members and 20% wholesale orders. That's the way it works. And also give you an idea of the scale that you can start with. And they started out in 2008. That's pretty much the same year that the farm shop closed down. They started with 30 shares. And now, this past year, I think they surpassed, I got these numbers from Thomas in October or so, and I think they probably are closer to 700 shares per week. So their gross income is over $600,000. And when I think about, this is, you can call that a success, and they are definitely scaling up in a very big way. For this group, the tenacity and optimism was really the first two things that I think were the key difference in this co-op, in this grower-owned business, making it or not. They mobilized member resources. They didn't ask for more money from their shareholders to start the farm shop business. And what they did instead was ask each of the members to contribute something as far as either packing space, the delivery truck, sometimes an employee to help with the packing. So that way they avoided having to raise any more capital. Another way of financing that made this thing work, especially when you only got 30 shares a week, is that most of the members extended payment terms from Capay Valley Farm Shops themselves to over net 30. So that actually counts for something, something significant. And now, lately, in the past few months, is Woody still here, or did he leave? The Slow Money connection came through. They gained, I think, an additional 8 shareholders. So they have, I think it's an additional investment of $80,000 or so. And that's going to help them scale up. And in spite of having the pretty bad experience of setting up a retail store, their plan is, again, to open a retail store. It's going to be, but they're not doing it in this weird area along the Highway 80. They're going to be doing it at the kind of the base of the Capay Valley in a town called Esparto. So they are being even further rooted within their community and making their investment there. So, yes. Net 30 means that you accept payments for product that you deliver on March 1st, you'll take it later than April 1st. It's not common to accept terms less or more than that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. So that is, if I want to leave you, if you want to jot down some things, ingredients for success, established partnerships, the 2 examples that I brought you are started out with established partnerships. They both did a lot of work on the planning side. They both raised their own capital. They had, I think, good, effective, strong leadership. Can't underestimate that. That's the one that's really hard to kind of identify and know that it's there. It's kind of, you see it when you see it. You know it when you see it. A lot of tenacity, and like you see, a little bit of luck goes a long way too. So those are the kind of the key ingredients. If there are groups of farmers in here, use these examples to give you some perspective on what it takes to organize a grower-owned business. So, thank you.
Hey folks, my name's Dan Hobbs. I'm from the Front Range of Colorado. I farm in the Pueblo, Rocky Ford area, southeastern part of the state. I'm here in a similar capacity to Luis. I'm a cooperative development specialist with the Farmers Union. Rocky Mountain Farmers Union is a 100-year-old general farm organization. We serve Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. So my territory is basically southern Colorado. I spend a lot of time in the Cortez area and then throughout the state of New Mexico. That's the deal. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so maybe just a couple of quick things. Luis and I are both part of these cooperative development centers. There's some 30 around the country. There's not one in Arizona, but it doesn't mean there couldn't be one someday. But he and I are probably the closest trained cooperative development specialists to the region. So going forward, if there's folks that want to form cooperatives, we'd both be great resources for that. And we have similar backgrounds working with agricultural groups. So I was kind of a last-minute add-on to this conference. It's really a great honor to be here. I met Jaime in Albuquerque here just about a week ago, and it's fun to come back to the area. I was here for a Christmas in 1980, I think it was, when an uncle lived in the region. So old memories, and I'm sure the community's changed a lot. But at any rate, I am going to talk about the cooperative business model. I'm going to talk about a co-op I work with in southern Colorado, but it's not so much a case study, although you're going to hear a few of the same things that Luis touched on. I want to look at basic functions, services, ingredients for success, risks and challenges, and I really want to focus on let's say low overhead cooperatives. In the old days, or even 10 years ago, we in the Rocky Mountain region saw a lot of larger cooperatives. Some of those larger cooperatives have fallen very hard. One of the examples we talk about is Mountain View, a group of wheat producers in the Longmont area that were supplying a single customer, Quiznos. And when Quiznos pulled their account, all those farmers went down with them. So just a classic example of a reason to have diversification, not only in your crops, I suppose, but in your markets. So we're seeing a lot of these diversified co-ops, very similar to what Luis was talking about. So at any rate, I want to start with the cooperative principles, and maybe I'll just say real quickly, cooperatives are a very specific form of doing business. I think there's a lot of confusion out there between cooperatives and nonprofits, and cooperative being some type of nonprofit. And whereas it's true that in certain states, such as New Mexico, cooperative statutes are written under nonprofit law, they're for-profit enterprises. Okay, and these are the 7 guiding principles that cooperatives around the world basically share: voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information. This one's important, this 5th one, the education. Even folks that have been in cooperatives for a long time sometimes revert to business as usual, and new leadership comes in, and people have to be retrained to what a cooperative is. It's a very flexible form of doing business, but it takes some work. Cooperation among cooperatives, concern for community, and believe it or not, Luis, I'm proposing an 8th principle, and that's having fun as we do this work. It's a lot of hard work putting together any kind of business, and especially a cooperative business among independent producers can be a long and difficult process, but just important to celebrate the journey, I think. Types of cooperatives, as Luis indicated, there's a whole bunch of different co-ops out there. Many of them are mainstream. Folks probably know them: Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray, Ace Hardware. A lot of big businesses are co-ops. These are some of the purposes on the left: marketing, shared services, purchasing, various ownership models. We at the Farmers Union work especially with producer-owned cooperatives. Robin, who's going to be speaking next, will talk about consumer-owned food-type co-ops. We're also seeing a lot of interesting sort of blended models these days. Consumer-producer co-ops. I've heard talk about producer-consumer-employee co-ops. Again, a flexible business model that's democratically managed, and you can have different classes of memberships. This is kind of the home team. This is a cooperative I'm a member of. Very small group. And again, I want to focus on these folks because it was set up with very few resources, and it's 7 members now, and it's basically what we call a closed cooperative. Okay, this is different than La Montanita, the food co-op in Albuquerque, or say REI, the sporting good co-op. Anybody can join those co-ops, open membership. This group is inviting members in, on an invitation-only basis by board approval. Okay, and the idea there is they want to make sure that folks fit kind of philosophically and with their sort of production standards. It's called the Arkansas Valley Organic Growers. This is one of the major watersheds in Colorado. starting at Leadville and going out towards Kansas. And this is mostly a 5 to 50 acre crowd of mixed produce and livestock producers. Arkansas Valley Organic Growers is mainly produce. People tend to have also their CSAs and their farmers markets, but they all were pretty far from the market centers of Pueblo, Colorado Springs, and Denver. And so they thought, well, you know, a little distribution co-op is what we need to really complement our direct sales. And indeed, some folks are starting now to move away from their direct retail markets and more into the wholesale market because it keeps them on the farm. The primary service of this co-op is to sell from a single availability list and to pick up produce directly from the farms. Anybody that does farmers markets knows what a grueling schedule it is, and so it's really nice to have that truck just pull up on a Friday afternoon and pick up that produce and take it away. The group did start as an informal association. So one thing that I picked up on in Luis's presentation is, you know, any amount of business planning is probably, you know, still not going to mesh with the hard reality of when you get on the ground. You've got to be nimble enough to retool. What this group did when they started out was do a pilot period. Okay, they ran for about 3 months to kind of test their systems and test the economics, sat back, regroup, analyzed things, and then really did a full-blown business plan. So that was a kind of a neat approach. Now, you guys probably experienced this around here too. All these 7 producers traditionally were running into Colorado Springs and peddling their produce to the same accounts over the course of about 10 weeks of every year. So people have the same stuff, and neighbors are competing with neighbors, bumping into each other in the parking lot, and it was all, you know, it was kind of the social hour. It was good to, you know, on some levels, but everybody realized, geez, we could do a lot better if we get organized. And so one of the foundational pieces of this group was entering into a production planning process. Second very important area, service of the cooperative, is this packing and handling document. This was modeled off of a great group out of Pennsylvania called the Tuscarora Organic Growers. TOG is their acronym. Anybody that's interested in starting a co-op, it'd be, you know, great to look at those guys. They've done a real nice job. Kind of were pioneers serving the Washington D.C. market. You know, with all the food safety stuff coming down the line, this kind of stuff is getting increasingly important. And in fact, I think, you know, an important role of the cooperative is going to be really helping folks with on-farm food safety plans. But this is, you know, people had various sort of standards of how to pack things and what materials to use, and this has really helped make things more uniform. So just running through some of the basic tools of the business. And I'm sorry that this, you know, these slides are so small. This just starts with beets and then goes down through squash here. This is just an example from early July of what the co-op had. So the general manager will elicit information from members on what they have available that week, place the purchase order, and then you can see in red here is price to the grower, and then over here is price to the account. So you can see maybe this is $274 total to the producer. This is $343 over here. This co-op is trying to run on a 20% margin. Okay, so the markup from the producer to what goes to the restaurant is what's sustaining the business. Okay, pays the manager, pays the insurance, all that type of stuff. Let's see. This is the first day in the new truck. Rural Business Enterprise Grants, as Luis mentioned, are very important tools for feasibility and business planning, but also for capitalization. There's very few grants out there that will help you capitalize a business. A nonprofit organization has to own the assets. In this case, there's a nonprofit that owns the truck, leases it to the cooperative. 14-foot reefer truck, and it kind of makes everything work. Again, picks up directly from the farms. And then there's a whole bunch of neat things that can be layered on top of some of these basic business functions. And these folks are getting to the stage now where they've been together about 5 years. They created this publication called The Farm Beat, and it's basically stories about food and about farmers and a little bit about policy here and there, but very just local kind of stuff. And they do 4 of these a year. Print about 5,000 at a time, and they give them to the accounts. So actually, I should have put a picture of the back, but they took the logo, this little beat, and they put farmer approved across the top of it. So they've started this little branding campaign, and they have a marketing kit that they take to the restaurants, and they get to be farmer approved restaurants. They put up their little decals, and they get a pile of these to hand out to their customers. And so in here are also profiled the various customers. Yeah. 5 minutes. All right, thanks. Yeah, again, just maybe Robin will talk some about this too. This food safety stuff is coming down the pike pretty fast. And so I know at least on the Front Range of Colorado, everybody's running around trying to figure out how we're going to respond to this. That may be a real important reason to have a co-op, or at least one reason is that co-ops can help with some of this this stuff. Product liability insurance. AVOG maintains a $1 million policy, which a number of the members just basically have never been able to justify having their own individual policies, and so that's enabled them to get into institutions such as schools and hospitals and that kind of thing. The discounted post-harvest supply is also a very important area. If anybody's bought a pallet of boxes or had a pallet shipped to you, it's exceedingly expensive. But when you buy as a group, you've got better bargaining power, and so this group will buy 5 or 6 pallets of boxes at a time, and makes a big difference. Risks and challenges. Some of this is repetitive here to what Luis has gone through, but capital is a big one, and that's why I just wanted to underscore the sort of low overhead approach. Chunking the process, starting as a pilot project, utilizing tools such as extended payment periods from the producers. None of these folks had a lot of capital to invest in the project, so there has to be some real creativity to get around that. Qualified staff is very critical, especially when you have farmers that are sort of spread out from one another. You need to have some trusted personnel involved. And even though folks are maybe spread apart, there needs to be serious attention to governance and leadership. Competition, obviously, always something to consider. Personality and communication dynamics can take businesses down quite handily. And then I think I won't go through that because Luis touched on it pretty well, but maybe I'll just leave it at this. Leadership is, I think, as important as any kind of planning. So important to have a project champion, somebody who's going to really spearhead the work, but that baton needs to be passed. People burn out, and so find a good leader, but find a succession plan also. I am going to be dashing to the airport, so if anybody wants to contact me, please write down this information or chat with Luis about cooperative development. Again, Farmers Union is available to have telephone meetings and possibly come back if there's folks here that want to start some kind of farmer-owned business. What time you got?
It's 3 o'clock.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll stay for like 5 or.
I'm curious what the impetus is for a lot of cooperatives to get going, and if you have any ready statistics or just general statements about improved chances for long-term viability.
Then you repeat the
Through
question.
cooperative, as opposed to just being an independent producer.
Okay, what's the impetus for putting a cooperative together and chances for long-term viability?
Does it increase with, is it more likely to increase with a cooperative than an independent producer?
Okay. Is it likely to increase with a cooperative as opposed to an independent producer? Yeah, I think the first thing I would say there is cooperatives are basically to do together what we cannot do alone. And a lot of this has to do with economies of scale. And certainly with this AVOG group, none of these folks would have ever had a refrigerated truck, ever been able to buy enough boxes to make it economic sense. So it's put them to a whole nother level of doing business. And in fact, they're able to compete with some of the mainline distributors in price. You want to add a few things to that?
Sure. I mean, I think the two case studies that I covered, the real reason why they got together, well, beginning with Capay Valley Growers, the interesting thing is that pretty much all of those members have their own CSAs, but they understand what the cost is of adding a new CSA, and they also know that to deal with an institution requires a whole different kind of strategy and communications and just operations. And none of them want to try to do that by themselves. And on the other end, it's what the customer wants. It's more diverse offerings, wider choices. So it's being more attractive to producers that to buyers that was also part of the function. And I mean, the real heart of the Coast Grown co-op was the mobile slaughter unit, and that it was impossible for anybody to try to do by themselves. And I want to actually add on that there is a co-op that is operating a mobile slaughter unit and doing marketing that has been able to overcome those limits to the number of animals per day and the number of days that you can have it operating. And that's up in Washington. That's the Island Grown co-op that has the mobile slaughter unit. So the expertise of the butcher is also important. So I wanted to make sure that anybody who's considering mobile slaughter, that's not the only possible outcome, is those limitations, is that it can be done better.
I think the last conference you had mentioned an overall cost for managing a cooperative to take some of the responsibility off of the farmers themselves in terms of the certification plans and all. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the question is about the overall cost of the cooperative. Yeah, so this group, the magic number for this group for break even is about $250,000 in gross sales. Okay, and again, that's with basically that 20% markup. They wanted to get kind of a premium price to the grower, and probably be a little higher than some of the other distributors, because this, as you all know, the shelf life of these products, when they come in fresh, like within 24 hours, is just like so much better than anything that comes from California or Mexico or anything like that. Yeah, so that is the basic formula. Is this cooperative is trying to run on 20%. We've done a number of analyses of producer co-ops in Colorado and New Mexico, and that really we always come back to that is about the ground floor for really starting something up. So that's the basis for break even and hopefully eventually profitability. And then we tend to think, well, let's hopefully within 3 to 4 years a group can hit that target. It's not hard when you have enough people together. This group is a little thin. They probably need another producer or two. They're pushing it, but they're not quite there yet. That cover the?
I think so. And so part of the managing the products and trying to coordinate who's growing what, is that all part of?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that those numbers includes basically part-time general manager, part-time driver, the liability insurance, fuel, just the basics of doing business.
And who did they sell to? They sold themselves? Or did they sell to like grocery stores?
Yeah.
Or farmers market?
Yep. This group is mostly selling to schools, restaurants, caterers, Not much to grocery stores. Most of these folks are, don't believe in organic certification, and there is a Whole Foods nearby, but it's either conventional or organic at Whole Foods, and so, like, philosophically, a lot of people just don't want to fool with Whole Foods. So we're actually not, interestingly, in the grocery stores.
Not in the grocery stores. I wonder what the difference is if you were selling to grocery stores. Does anybody know what the markup is between what you sell to the grocery store for and what they sell to the public for?
What do you think? Usually 50, 60?
I've been watching the margins increase over the years,
Yeah.
so that it's pretty much almost double the price of what you sell it for. So if you sell a case of greens, each bunch worth $1, it's usually on the shelf for close to $2. And I did not see that happen, 10 years ago.
No,
It was less.
It used to be that the vegetables were sort of like leaders
Mm-hmm.
for the grocery store to get people in. Now I think they actually use them to make a big profit.
Yeah, somewhere between 30 and 40% as the margin
Okay.
is what it would be reasonable.
What was the geographical distribution of the producers here in these case studies? And also, do you have any experience with producers that are, pretty much dispersed, but selling from a common location? I think Maine has some sort of program like that.
For very dispersed co-ops, I know that Family Farm Seed Co-op is very dispersed, and we hear a little bit about that. But for fresh fruit and veg, there is kind of a geographical limitation, and you can make up for it in scale or number of members. But I'm sorry, I can't think of, especially the kind of co-ops that are based on regionality and localness. That's
I think that in Arizona we have some constraints. You can't grow apples in Tucson, but you can in Wilcox. Okay, so 2 hours away you can bring apples in, and Phoenix, they don't get apples either. So that's the sort of problems I think that, I think there's quite a few people in this room that are distributed, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours away from Tucson.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm going to expand on this distribution question a little bit. I've been involved with a lot of projects. I've worked with third-party distributors, and a lot of rugs have been pulled out from producers. And so I'm a big advocate for producer-controlled, producer-owned distribution systems. If you've got a core system, though, there's all kinds of interesting synergies that can be tied into that, with other people moving, trucking produce around. I think the basic thing, you got to just fiddle with the numbers here, but is keep the trucks full. If you can keep the trucks full, you can go further afield and pick things up. But when you're dealing with commodity things like apples or something, it just might make sense to just have a third party, bringing a truckload of those into a central cooler and then work off of those for a couple of months. So there's just all kinds of different ways to resolve distance. But this group that I talked about, they're all within about 60 miles of each other. That's, and then when the truck goes to market, it covers about 110 miles in a day, just as a point of reference. I guess we're out of time.
Just about there. Yeah,
Okay.
let's get you to the airport. Thanks, Dan, Luis. Appreciate it.